Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. I am your host, as always, Fearless Floyd. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, leave a comment below. You can always reach me at the Fearless Floyd Show at yahoo.com. The fearlessfloydshow.com is my website, and I'm the Fearless Floyd Show across every social media platform that you can shake a stick at. And here we go. Today, I'm going to present part three of Darrell Link's story, A Farmer's Nightmare. And without further ado, let's get this party started. Let me get over here. And here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. And I'm proud to present part three of the Darrell Link story, Farmer's Nightmare. And I already have Darrell already hooked up, ready to go. So like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell. And Darrell, let's continue the story or the nightmare, if you want to carry on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. The floor is
Go ahead.
the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, well, my name is Darrell Link, and I grew up in South Dakota, southeast South Dakota. And what I want to share is how the swarm of the corporate agents work together in harmony in the attack against the people of our country. And in my experience, it was where I was a family farmer. And I'm going to do a little bit of a background, and then I'm going to get a little more into the detail of what transpired and what led up to the confiscation and all that. So after graduation from high school, I purchased 10 Holstein heifer calves and worked on the neighbor's farm that summer and took that money. And the next year I purchased another 25 head of calves, and 2 years later I began milking. And this gave me to get the government job.
Darrell, did you say you did that right out of high school? You bought 10 calves?
Yes, I did. I was given all my childhood money, and there was $650 that I had that my dad saved up for me, and he said I could have it all. And he told me I needed to save a little bit for a rainy day, but I said I want to take it all out, and I purchased 10 calves, and they were $50 a piece, and I raised them, and that's how I got started. I had a bad car accident when I was a senior in high school, and I was, my dad covered the expenses, so I worked for 2 years for nothing. But while I was, doing his work, I also took care of my little 10 calves, and I helped a neighbor out, which gave me a little bit of extra money. So that freed up enough to purchase another 25 head of Holstein heifer calves the next year. And 2 years later, I began milking. And this gave me the preference to get an FHA government guaranteed loan. So I purchased 80 acres of land, about a half or a quarter mile from my parents' farm. And later I assumed the neighbor's farm with an FHA loan and lived on that farm later. But years later, it was brought to my attention the mortgage contract and the promissory note that I signed was really an unconscionable contract, where it stated that the borrower does hereby mortgage, assign, and warrant unto the government the following property situated in Charles Mix County, South Dakota. And this is a quote right from the mortgage contract. And then it gave the land description, together with all rights, interest, easements, rediments, etc., but not limited to ranges, refrigerators, clothes washers, clothes dryers, etc., called, quote, the property. To have and to hold the property unto the government and is assigned forever in fee simple. Borrower for himself, his heirs, executors, administrators, successor, assigns and warrants the title to the property to the government against all lawful claims and demands whatsoever, except for liens, encumbrances, easements, and reservations or conveyances specified above in the real estate mortgage, as stated in a previous video, parts 1 and 2. Certain words in the mortgage document used all capital letters, like the word borrower, warrants, the title, waiver, etc. This is part of what is called state and government secrets. This is clear evidence that FHA is not being honest, but has intent to remove property from the people, even if they had a lawful claim. And this is basically the corporate interest. And I'm going to read you the little part on this here waiver that's in part of the mortgage contract. It says waiver. Oh, this is in all capital letters. It says the borrower acknowledges and agrees that if he defaults, a non-judicial foreclosure sale of the property may be conducted without a hearing of any kind and without notice beyond the publication of the notice of sale. The borrower hereby waives any right he may have to any such hearing and notice. Nevertheless, and then it goes on, but here, this is any lawful claims. Wow. So anyway, I quit milking a few years later, and then I moved to that neighbor's farm that I purchased by assuming his FHA mortgage, continuing and backgrounding Holstein heifer calves and selling them as bred heifers, and also fed a lot of feeder pigs and sold butcher hogs. Commodity prices were always so depressed, so I got involved in hedging hogs for a profit. And this led me into speculating with grain prices in 1993, where the Midwest was underwater, experiencing heavy rains, which didn't allow many of the crops to be planted. And wheat was at its historical low prices. And I believe that these historical low prices couldn't stay that low for a whole year. So I purchased I was charting at that time and kind of watching the markets and trying to get the rhythm. And so I purchased a lot of wheat contracts and other grain contracts, thinking that the market lows would be put in May and June, but the bottoms were put in June and July. And remember, the devil will always take you twice as far as you would ever expect to have to go. And PCA, which is Production Credit Association, forced me out of these commodity prices positions, which caused me a significant loss. But I still had way more assets and liabilities. But they forced me out the third week in June, and 8 days later, the prices went up 40 cents or 40 some cents. And I couldn't believe that. I mean, I couldn't hang on any longer. The pressure, become where you don't know, what to expect. But this was the beginning of a legal battle that still rages on to this day. I tried to refinance with a local bank in Avon, South Dakota, who said that when I showed them all my assets and liabilities, they said it looked good, and to call them back in the morning. When I called back the next day, the bank informed me that they were not interested in refinancing the loan or lending any money, and completely opposite of what they told me the day before. So I signed a mediation. I went and did a mediation agreement with Production Credit Association, and I signed that mediation agreement in an attempt to work out the situation. A couple weeks after signing the agreement, I was selling corn and trying to get this stuff done. But then PCA brought a foreclosure action against me in state court why they shouldn't be able to confiscate all my property. The banks wanted me in the bankruptcy court to save face, and which was what I recognized. You know, I was selling, you know, crops in an attempt to honor the mediation agreement, but now I had to start preparing to defend myself in state court. This is why I filed the Chapter 12 bankruptcy in order to stay the foreclosure action and try to work it out in the bankruptcy court, where I filed a Chapter 12 bankruptcy on March 21st, 1994. I noticed that the bankruptcy court proceedings were trying to force me into a plan and a schedule of payments, which would be very hard to meet. And I met a man named Joe Holland, who worked for many years with the Security Exchange. And he recognized, you know, the corruption in the corporate system. So he started an organization called the North American Freedom Council out of Boonville, Indiana. He shared how to perfect non-judicial commercial lien process and hold accountable those who have an obligation to support and defend the Constitution for the United States of America. After not wanting to consent to a contract with the bankruptcy court by signing the plan and the payment schedule, when I sensed they were trying to set me up for failure, the North American Freedom Council then, he told me that if I got dismissed out of bankruptcy and do whatever I had to do to get out of bankruptcy, then he could help me. And so I decided to go that route, and I did not want to contract in once I seen the way the system worked and that I was contracting into a foreign jurisdiction. But so North American Freedom Council provided me with 3 money orders that I tendered to discharge the debt obligation with PCA, FHA, and Commercial State Bank of Wagner, South Dakota. These money orders were pending official determination of the substance of said money by the Attorney General. As you know, credit money don't have any substance, only a promise to pay, maybe. So remember the Second 13th Amendment to the Constitution for the United States of America, which says, I'll quote it, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as a punishment for the crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation," unquote. Congress is our public servant authorized with delegated powers only from the sovereignty of the people, and trick the people into being a U.S. citizen subject status tied to the birth certificated entity, which is warehoused in Washington, D.C., and then claiming that we are a resident of the District of Columbia, which was created on bond paper and given a Dun & Bradstreet number and traded publicly worldwide as collateral for the public debt. The corporate system is using interest-bearing debt as if it is money and can only be defined as a road to slavery. The interest is always created by creating more debt, because everything that we circulate is debt. So in order to come up with the interest, more debt has to be created. And so every year the debt gets bigger and bigger. And this is where we're at today, where we're talking trillions. And that is a number that's actually unfathomable to count to. If you were to count to $1 trillion, it would take you, if you counted one number for every second, it would take you 31,650 some years to count to 1 trillion.
Exactly.
If every dollar equaled a second in counting, and when you're counting 1,000, 1,002, it's going to take you at least 1 second to count one number. So it'd take you a lot of years to get there. This method is used to create victimless crimes through legislative statute violation. justifying the involuntary servitude of the Second 13th Amendment, that the bar attorneys who operate the legislative for-profit corporate system all benefit from, as they plunder the fruits of the labor of the people through the deception, using identity theft by spelling the people's names in all capital letters, holding them as if they are chattel and they are a corporate person and as chattel for that public debt. And in legus or a legal fiction, considered to be incompetent and needing an attorney to represent themselves as a legal corporate person to defend their living vessel, which is used as the surety for that vessel in commerce. This was a major con game from the get-go, establishing the privately owned Federal Reserve Bank in 1913, which was allowed to fractionalize the money, where they were allowed to lend out 9 times more than what was on deposit, creating overwhelming debt to the country and the people. I bring to your attention Leviticus chapter 19, verse 36, Proverbs 11, verse 1, and Proverbs 20, verse 23, and Micah chapter 6, verses 11 and 12. I'm going to read a little bit from the King James Version, which states, quote, "Shall I count them pure with the wicked balances and the bag of deceitful weights? For the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth," unquote. But that's what I'm seeing today, is basically those that have used this here debt system to gain all this credit and stealing the labor from the people, and have confiscated, where the majority of the wealth is held by 1 or 2% of the people in the world, and everybody else is basically their servant. But at this time, I was recording several documents in Charles Mix County until Judge Lee Tappy from Platte, South Dakota, issued an order dated on September 16, 1994, which stated, and this was filed in the Federal District Court, and it was received on September 19th. And now this was right before, this is when I filed the motion to dismiss to get out of the bankruptcy court, but I was filing these documents into the county record and then putting them into the court record, and they didn't like that. And so I'm going to read this order, what it stated. It says, in the matter of the recordation of certain documents at the Charles Mix County Register of Deeds office, order, the court having been advised that certain individuals have been recording or attempting to record documents in Charles Mix County Register of Deeds office, Lake Andes, South Dakota, which documents are subversive in nature and repugnant to the Constitution of the United States and the state of South Dakota, and to the political subdivisions thereof, and the laws promulgated by said political entities, and it further appearing to the court that such documents are not the type of document permitted to be recorded under South Dakota Codified Law 43-28-1, and the same do not affect the title of or the possession of the real property. It further appearing to the court that such documents are ineffectual and all requests and serve no purpose but to clutter the books and records of the Register of Deeds of Charles Mix County, South Dakota, and it appearing that the court, that under the laws of the state of South Dakota, this court may enter an order ex parte prohibiting the records, recording and filing or attempting recording or filing of the documents which are not permitted by statute to be recorded or filed with the said Register of Deeds office, and the court having been fully advised in the premises and good cause appearing thereof, it is hereby ordered that the Charles Mix County Register of Deeds shall refuse to record or file any documents which are not permitted be filed by South Dakota Codified Law 43-28-1 and other applicable statutes, and said, Register of Deeds shall refuse to record or file any documents presented to her which do not affect title or to possession of real property, but such as, but not limited to, and these are documents that I've put into the county recorder, which is the affidavits of status of a American national, affidavit of non-subject status, affidavit of revocation and rescission of signature and power of attorney, where such affidavits do not refer to any prior grant written power of attorney which is recognized under the laws of the United States of America or any of its political subdivisions. Assignee's declaration of land patent, memorandum of law on rights, privileges, immunities, declarations of homestead, declarations of allodial title. And it is further ordered that the Charles Mix County Register of Deeds shall remove from her records and files any documents which are prohibited be recorded or filed pursuant to this order. And it is further ordered that this order shall remain in full force and effect in the event there is a change in office of the Charles Mix County Register of Deeds or until further ordered. And signed and dated by Paul J. Kearns. Okay, this is Paul Kearns did this before Lee Tappy took over. Okay, I was thinking that was Lee Tappy, but he took over the case later. I'm sorry about that. On September 29th of 1994, the banks did not want my bankruptcy case to be dismissed from the bankruptcy court, and they wanted me to consent and contract into the bankruptcy court foreign jurisdiction to justify their control practice and save face from the people. On September 29th, 1994, the court dismissed the case based upon my motion to dismiss, and Judge Eckert was ordering, quote, the court specifically found no existence of fraud on the debtor's part. Based on said findings, it is hereby ordered, and ordered is in all capital letters, that the Chapter 12 case of the debtor is dismissed and all property of the bankruptcy estate is again vested in the debtor, unquote. About a week later, I served this notice of a non-judicial commercial lien process, all done under the penalties of perjury upon all 58 parties involved in trying to take my property, which is substance, for an issuance of credit, which is a promise to pay, IOU, which was discharged by my tender of the money orders, pending determination of the substance of said money. So Rick A. Yarnell, who is the Chapter 12 trustee, immediately filed a motion to vacate, alter, amend, or modify the order of dismissal and reservation of jurisdiction on certain matters. Bankruptcy Judge Peter K. Eckert issued an order granting his motion to expedite the hearing. And the bank agents all joined the motion to vacate, dismiss. And I filed a response objecting to the vacating of the order of dismissal. On October 25th, the judge issued an order vacating the order of dismissal and entered a restraining order, restraining debtor from filing any judicial or non-judicial liens and reassigning the case to Chief Judge Irvin N. Hoyt, who is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy judge. But this was all basically to get protection from the corporate court, where they could get control of this here commercial lien process. As in a criminal trial later, I had the Chapter 12 trustee up on the stand, and he basically said that I asked him you know, why he moved to reinstate it. And he said, well, you had all these documents out there and these liens. And I said, no, I said they were not liens. I said there was only a notice. And I said it was all done under the penalty of perjury, and you had 30 days to refute it point by point. And that's all you had to do, and it went away. And he said, well, we didn't know what your intent was, so we moved to reinstate it.
These are UCC ones, but they were non-lien filings.
It was basically an administrative process.
Okay.
It basically laid out their violations, their constitutional violations, and their violations of law, and they had 30 days to refute it point by affidavit, and they weren't able to do it, and they didn't know what to do because they said we feared it would encumber all of our property, so we didn't know what to do, so we moved to reinstate the bankruptcy. And then once it was reinstated, they didn't know what to do, so that's how they converted to an involuntary Chapter 7. So then on October 31st, I filed into the record an affidavit of revocation of signature and power of attorney with a notice of rescission and discharge of the bankruptcy case regarding the petition dated March 21st, 1994, the cover sheet, the declaration concerning debtor schedule, and the statement of financial affairs. And it was the next day, a motion was filed by PCA of the Midlands to expedite a hearing regarding a motion to convert the case from a Chapter 12 to a Chapter 7 liquidation. And the motion was to remove debtor as debtor in possession, and all by the PCA attorneys, which was Hosmer and Kettering out of Yankton, South Dakota. And Douglas R. Kettering was the attorney for PCA that was attending the hearings.
Okay.
And on October 4th, which is just 3 days later, Kettering immediately filed a motion to compel endorsement of the checks from the grain sold when I attempted to make the mediation agreement, which stopped when they brought the civil action against me in state court. And on the 10th, which is 6 days later, I filed an objection by a response to the trustee's objection to my affidavit of revocation of signature, power of attorney, and notice of rescission and discharge. And so then on December 1st, there was a bankruptcy hearing was held, and there they reinstated the Chapter 12, which was converted to an involuntary Chapter 7, and received the hearing minutes a couple days later. And I received the hearing minutes a couple days later. And on the 7th of December, I filed a refusal for cause without dishonor the judge's hearing minutes. I was not present at this hearing, as I was dismissed, and the court had no jurisdiction to reinstate the converted or to convert the case to its involuntary Chapter 7. As even in their own rules, it says that a farmer cannot be converted to an involuntary chapter or involuntary Chapter 7 because of the nature of their business. But so then the next day, this A. Thomas Pokla, who was appointed to be the Chapter 7 trustee and was granted a writ of assistance. The same day, Judge Hoyt, who was the Chapter 7 bankruptcy judge at that time, issued an order allowing the removal and sale of the cattle. And the U.S. Marshals for the District of South Dakota was there to assist in this theft pursuant to the request of the Chapter 7 trustee, Thomas Pokla.
Wow.
And then I received this document, or this response to this here, that they had these hearing minutes. And so the next day, it was on the 12th of December, I had the deputy sheriff in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, serve upon the bankruptcy court, the Chapter 7 trustee, a document that I filed in the United States District Court, which was an application for preliminary injunction to quash the orders, together with an affidavit, exhibits, and a proposed temporary restraining order. The U.S. District Court did not rule on the injunction or issue a restraining order. And when I took that into I filed it into the court, and then I went up to the marshals to have them the marshals serve it, on these other parties that I had the sheriff do. And they looked at the document, and they looked at me, because this was the first time I ever seen any of them. And there was 4 of them there, and they all looked at me like, this is where we're going tomorrow. We can't serve this. So they said, no, we can't serve this document. So that's when I took it down to the sheriff. I went to another guy, this John Heller, who was basically a friend of one of the deputies, and the deputy, he said, that he would probably accommodate the situation, which he was glad to do. And so on the 13th of December, which was the next day, began the seizure of the cattle. And that took about, and I talked a lot about that in parts 1 and 2, where they come in, where they sent 17 carloads of agents who pointed their guns toward the house, letting me know that they were in control. And let me tell you, it wasn't a good scene. I was sitting at the kitchen table that morning, making out some Christmas cards to send out, and I looked up and I said, oh man, I said, looks like today's my day. And here was all these cars coming swarming in the driveway from each direction with their lights on. And there was a neighbor that had a scanner radio, and he heard the whole setup just down the road from where he was. So he heard them staging and planning this out, and they pulled in. I don't know what time it was, around 7:30, if I remember right. So in the morning of the cattle seizure, what was really interesting was there was 4 young men who claimed to be that they were from the Gregory, South Dakota militia, who were all dressed in military fatigues, and they came into the yard and talked to the marshals, who I never knew, I never invited, and I don't know how they could have ever known about this here bankruptcy court seizure, unless they were invited by the marshals or some affiliated body with the bankruptcy court, or a secret society like the Masonic Lodge. Now this made for more drama and kind of boosted the propaganda to paint a negative tone on the term militia, where they've demonized the term militia, like militia is an evil word.
Right.
But in every state constitution, it says every able-bodied male from 18 to 45 is the militia and shall be governed by the governor of that state. But they never really did anything while they were there, but it was more for the verbiage that got put in the records and all this here to demonize, like I was affiliated with this militia group. I never seen them in absolutely anywhere. And since they took this away they took all my chores away. Jack McClam, who was basically the most decorated police officer in the Phoenix Police Department, was given a speech out in Rapid City, South Dakota, and a couple friends invited me to ride along, and so I went out there. And I didn't know anybody out there, but I recognized 4 young men sitting there with their fatigues on.
Oh, no way.
It was the same group. And I don't know what group they were affiliated with, but I know when we had a common law court hearing up in Plankington, South Dakota at the 4-H building, when we were dealing with basically where they changed the South Dakota Constitution, and we did basically a default issue on where I did a cease and desist order, where we met as a grand jury, and they found cause and issued an order. But it was kind of interesting that here come this here young man in there, and he seemed to only be interested in what's your name, where you're from, what's your contact information, and all this here. And he said he was doing a research paper for the Dakota Wesleyan University on common law courts. and his name was Matthew Miller with the FBI. And I walked out the door and I looked around the corner and I seen this one little vehicle. It had about 20 antennas on it. And I thought, wow, okay. Yeah, that's normal for a college student. So, you know, we kind of went on with the deal, and he, you know, prodded everybody around there, and we got introduced to him later on. But on that same day when they stole the cattle on the 13th of December, I sent an overnight certified letter as a notice to the sale barn that there were 5 semi-loads of stolen cattle that were not to be sold in Sioux Center, Iowa at the dairy sale, and they were to be returned. And a few days later, I got that certified letter, was returned, refused, and unopened. And that same day, I called the sheriff of Sioux Center, Iowa over there to warn him that there were 5 loads of stolen cattle coming his way and that they needed to be turned around. And I give him the truck identifications, the numbers, and all this stuff, and, you know, which didn't go nowhere. But anyway, it's still on the record. And that was what I was mainly concerned, was to get a record. And so the next day, which was the 14th, then I filed a theft loss report with DeSmit Farm Mutual Insurance Company of South Dakota, that the Holstein cows and the bulls that were stolen from my farm. And on the 15th of December, which was the next day, the property claims manager, Merle Walter, came to the farm to investigate the loss and determined that he determined or claimed that they were legally repossessed, even though the bankruptcy court had no authority to reinstate the dismissed bankruptcy and to protect himself from liability of the crimes which they were participating in, and to profit from the plunder. I'm going to read a little part of a letter that this agent Merle Walter sent to the Division of Criminal Investigation, and they provided information which was later included in the federal indictment against me in federal court. And he writes this. Okay, on December 14th and 15th, and he said, on December 15th, I drove down to Darrell Link's residence to investigate the loss. Upon arriving to the yard, he noticed there was a few head of cattle in the corrals. Yet at this time, so he knew that all the cattle were not taken. I tried to contact the loan agency on my way down to the Link farm. The loan agency was Production Credit Association of Yankton, South Dakota, and the person in charge was Mr. Williamson. I had no success in reaching Mr. Williamson by phone prior to visiting with Mr. Link. After visiting with Mr. Link for a few moments, it was quite apparent that the cattle had been repossessed. He pressed the issue as to the theft charges, and I told him that I could not continue with the theft investigation until he had filled out the proper papers, which at that time I presented him with a proof of loss to fill out, which he did. At that point, he also supplied me with a list of several law enforcement people who had been present along with the bank officers who repossessed the cattle. He told me that he had the militia would gather together in Yankton and have a trial of these people, and if found guilty, they would take them out and shoot them. He continued on with quite a dissertation, or the posse comitatus literature, and gave me several copies of their reasoning for the legal actions or the theft claim that he was submitting to me. I gathered all the information that he wanted to give me and told him that I would be in contact with him in the near future. That's just a blatant lie. I never raised my voice. I've never, ever did anything like that and wouldn't even consider it. But, you know, this was the setup, I believe, where they had these people come out from the militia to help put this here kind of verbiage into the accusation.
Wow.
And then the next day on December 16th, he says, I was contacted by Mr. Leon Dirks, attorney in charge of the bankruptcy proceedings, and I also inquired about the legal documents which substantiated the legal possession of Mr. Link's cattle. At that time, I informed Mr. Dirks of the conversation with Darrell Link in regards to the handling of the people in charge of the repossession, that he was going to try them and then execute them if found guilty. And Louis Dirks was basically the thief in charge, working under the Chapter 7 trustee as his henchman. And on December 28th, which is here a little over a week later, he said, after receiving the proper documents, I mailed a copy of that document from the United States Bankruptcy Court, along with the letter dated December 28th to Mr. Link denying any coverage for theft in this case. Shortly after sending that letter, I was contacted by the Division of Criminal Investigation Office in regards to my conversation with Mr. Link on December 15th. On January 2nd, 1995, he received a second request from Mr. Link in regards to that theft claim, and again, we sent another denial letter dated January 17th, 1995, stating our position. Again, that demand for payment would not be honored because that was a legal repossession and not a theft. But, you know, what kind of an investigation could have they had when, what's that?
I said, what? That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, what kind of authority did they have? Because the bankruptcy court, it is totally relying upon your consent. And this is where I withdrew my consent. I asked to be dismissed. The judge ordered it to be dismissed. Basically said that there was specifically no existence of fraud on my part. And then the state court, in harmony with the bankruptcy court, I filed a motion of revocation and rescission of signature with the power of attorney to void all that stuff, because I withdrew my consent totally in the record. And I also filed it into the county recorder, and that's what triggered the judge in Charles Mix County to issue an order that I couldn't record in the public record. And later on, I filed affidavits of credit. They wouldn't let me file anything anymore in that county recorder. So I filed basically criminal affidavits of the parties that were all involved, and I wanted to, you know, get this basically in the record somewhere. So I took it over to Douglas County, which is a county about 20, 30 miles away, and I filed it there, and there was no problem, no questions asked. Give them their, whatever their filing fee was, and it was done.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was clear by the actions of the corporate agents, the state of and the U.S. employees operating under the authority of the Trading with the Enemy Act as amended of March 9th, 1933, where the in legis or legal fiction, which is the birth certificated person, has been considered and declared the enemy, incompetent, needing an attorney to speak on behalf of the civilly dead commercial entity as defined as a commercial vessel on your birth certificate registered with the state of corporation, spelled in all capital letters. The same as on a tombstone, generally, where on the tombstones, the name is always spelled in all capital letters, and they are basically identified as civilly dead. They have no rights. So, and then they're given a social security number. And this is basically an account that is used to trade and operate in commerce, because as a living man or woman, we don't have that capacity, but as a enfranchised corporate person, we can, and that is the vessel that was created through that birth certificate, since we have no lawful money to do business in this here commercial system.
Right.
Then the state holds us under the doctrine of parens patriae, and that is where the state becomes your legal guardian over the incompetent person.
And there you go. And that's part 3. This is actually a continuous video. I'm going to cut it in. Excuse me. I'm going to cut it into 2 parts, 3 and 4. But you're going to see in the background, it's going to say part 3 and part 4, actually. And I can't change that because that was my virtual background at the time. So is what it is. This will be posted. These are going to be scheduled. Like, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell, leave a comment below. Please share this video with everybody you can. If you want to reach me, The Fearless Floyd Show at yahoo.com. TheFearlessFloydShow.com is my website. The Fearless Floyd Show is on every social media platform you can shake a stick at. So you want to find me, that's the best place to find me. Telegram, absolutely. I am focusing on my own stuff right now, doing videos as you see. I'm doing them at my own leisure. I will continue the high noon show here soon. Don't know when. I'm not really in any hurry to get back into the nitty-gritty grind of being Fearless Floyd, as you can tell. Puerto Rico gave me an enlightenment of peace, tranquility, and no stress. And it's difficult to come back here to the States and just dive in headfirst into the stress. It's insane. That's all I can say. Man, I was so at peace in Puerto Rico. Wish I was still there. I understand why people go there and don't come back. I have a whole bunch of material that I want to do on Puerto Rico that I have stored. I have notes ready to go. I just haven't been able to get to it, but I will soon. So stay tuned for part 4 with Darrell. This will continue. I'm sure there'll be a part 5, part 6, maybe even a part 7 and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We might even do a 24-part series and only do 19 parts and just leave you all confused. I'm kidding. I'm not doing that to you again. As this proceeds, I will put it out there. So thank you. I appreciate you all being here. I hope you have a safe and happy weekend. October's right here. I don't know where 2023 went, but it just, man, Halloween's here. What comes after Halloween? Thanksgiving, then Christmas, and then it's Happy New Year. 2024, the year of chaos, 2024. Put it on your calendar. Get ready. You're going to see all kind of weird, crazy, insane, historical events happening worldwide, not only in the United States. So stay tuned, get prepared. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Go watch my video on what's an asset and liability. That's all I can tell you. Thank you for being here. Peace in the Middle East. Go RVN. Hopefully this is our week. I've said that a gazillion times, but it is what it is. If you haven't watched my video on Trump, RICO, Georgia RICO, New York RICO, the Trump family potentially facing RICO, or the entire Republican Party being dissolved with the stroke of a pen by a Superior Court judge in Georgia. That's what our politics have become, where one judge, one little state judge in Georgia can affect world politics. That's the depravity of the United States political system today. Wake up, smell the coffee, go pick you a rose, and get ready.